Have you ever wondered why, in the darkest moments of our lives, when everything seems to be falling apart, there's always this strange sense of peace waiting just beneath the surface? Why is it that when people describe their near-death experiences, they don't speak of terror or darkness, but of an overwhelming, indescribable peace? Today, we're going to explore one of the most profound mysteries of human existence. Why do we feel peace when we die? Imagine for a moment that everything you've ever known, every worry that's kept you awake at night, every fear that's held you back, suddenly dissolves into absolute tranquility. This isn't just the absence of pain or fear. It's the presence of something far more profound. It's like coming home after the longest journey of your life. Except the home you're returning to is more familiar than any place you've ever known on Earth. Throughout my decades of research into near-death experiences, I've spoken with thousands of individuals who have glimpsed what lies beyond the veil of death. And there's one element that appears with stunning consistency across cultures, religions, ages, and circumstances. This profound, all-encompassing peace. It doesn't matter if someone was in a car accident, having a heart attack, or slowly fading in a hospital bed. The peace they describe transcends all earthly understanding. One person told me it was like suddenly remembering something they'd always known but had forgotten. Another described it as finally putting down a heavy burden they didn't even realize they'd been carrying their whole life. These aren't just pretty words or comforting thoughts. These are consistent reports from people who have literally been to the edge of existence and returned to tell us about it. But why? Why peace? Why not confusion, or excitement, or even just nothing at all? The answer might lie in understanding what death really is. You see, we've been taught to think of death as an ending, a cessation, a final curtain call. But what if death is actually a return? What if the peace people feel isn't because they're leaving something behind, but because they're coming back to something they've always known? Think about the moments in your own life when you felt the deepest peace. Maybe it was holding your child for the first time, or watching a sunset after a difficult day, or in those quiet moments of prayer or meditation when the noise of the world finally fades away. In those moments, aren't you touching something eternal? Something that exists beyond the temporary concerns of bills and deadlines and social obligations. The peace that comes with dying might be the soul's recognition of its true home. Like a drop of water returning to the ocean, we don't cease to exist. We expand into something infinite. The boundaries that define us in life, all those edges that separate me from everything else, begin to dissolve. And in that dissolution, there's not loss, but reunion. I remember speaking with a woman who had died for several minutes during surgery. She told me that the peace she felt wasn't passive or empty. It was alive, intelligent, welcoming. She said, it was like being embraced by love itself, not the limited human version we experience here, but love as a fundamental force of existence. It knew me, she said, better than I knew myself, and it had been waiting for me all along. This raises profound questions about the nature of consciousness and identity. If we feel such peace in death, what does that say about who we really are? Perhaps we're not these temporary collections of worries and wants, achievements and failures. Perhaps we're something far more vast, temporarily focused into these human experiences like light passing through a prism. The mystics have been telling us this for millennia, that we are not human beings having spiritual experiences, but spiritual beings having human experiences. The peace in death might be the moment when we remember this truth, when the amnesia of birth finally lifts and we recall our true nature. But here's what's even more fascinating. Many people who return from these experiences bring that peace back with them. They're changed, not because they've seen something supernatural, but because they've remembered something fundamental. They live differently, love more freely, fear less. They've touched that eternal peace and discovered it's not waiting for us after death. It's here now, underneath all our mental noise and emotional turbulence. One man told me that after his near-death experience, he could access that peace anytime he needed it. It's like there's this quiet room inside me now, he said. No matter how chaotic things get outside, I can step into that room and remember what's real. He wasn't talking about escaping life, but about finding a deeper foundation for living, And this is perhaps the most important lesson from these experiences. The peace isn't just waiting for us in death. It's available to us now. We carry it within us, like a song we've forgotten we know. Sometimes it takes a brush with death to remember the melody, but it's always there, playing softly beneath the surface of our everyday consciousness. Think about water again. On the surface, there might be waves, storms, turbulence, but go deep enough, and there's always stillness. Our consciousness works the same way. The surface of our minds might be choppy with thoughts, fears, desires, but in our depths, there's an ocean of peace that nothing can disturb. Death might simply be the moment when we stop identifying with the waves and remember we are the ocean. This understanding transforms how we view not just death, but life itself. If peace is our natural state, our true home, then what are all these fears and anxieties that dominate our daily existence? They're like clouds passing through the sky, temporary, insubstantial, unable to touch the vast blue expanse that remains eternally unchanged behind them. I've noticed something remarkable in my research. People who have experienced this peace in near-death situations often describe feeling more alive afterward, not less. It's as if touching death awakened them to life. They speak of colors being more vivid, relationships becoming more precious, simple moments holding profound beauty. The peace they encountered didn't make them want to escape life. It made them want to live it more fully. One woman described it beautifully. She said that before her experience, she lived like someone constantly bracing for impact, always tense, always worried about what might go wrong. After touching that infinite peace, she realized she'd been living in a self-created prison of fear. The peace was always there, she just couldn't see it through the bars of her own anxiety. This brings us to a crucial question. If this peace is always present, why don't we feel it? Why do we suffer so much in life if our true nature is peaceful? The answer might lie in the very nature of human consciousness. We're designed to focus on problems, to anticipate threats, to plan for the future and learn from the past. This serves us well for survival, but it also creates a kind of static that drowns out the deeper signal of peace that's always broadcasting from our core. It's like living next to the ocean but never hearing the waves because we're always wearing headphones, listening to our own thoughts. Death might simply be the moment when we finally take off the headphones and hear what's been there all along. The eternal rhythm of peace that underlies all existence. But we don't have to wait for death to experience this. Throughout history, spiritual traditions have developed practices designed to quiet the mind and access this deeper peace. Meditation, prayer, contemplation. These aren't just religious exercises. They're technologies for tuning into the frequency of peace that's always available to us. I remember interviewing a monk who had spent decades in meditation. When I asked him about the peace described in near-death experiences, he smiled and said, "Why wait for death? The door is open now." He explained that through practice, we can learn to access the same state of consciousness that people encounter in death, that boundless peace that exists beyond thought, beyond fear, beyond the illusion of separation. This doesn't mean we should seek to escape life or ignore its challenges. Rather, it means we can face those challenges from a place of deep inner stability. Like a tree with deep roots can withstand any storm, a person anchored in this inner peace can navigate life's difficulties without being overwhelmed by them. The reports from near-death experiences consistently describe this peace as intelligent, aware, loving. It's not the peace of unconsciousness or oblivion. It's the peace of coming home to a love that knows us completely and accepts us unconditionally. Many describe feeling known in a way they've never experienced in life, seen, understood, and loved exactly as they are, without any need to change or improve. This suggests something profound about the nature of existence itself. If the foundation of reality is this intelligent, loving peace, then fear is not our natural state. It's a temporary confusion. Anxiety is not who we are. It's a forgetting of who we are. Depression is not a fundamental flaw. It's a disconnection from our source. One of the most moving accounts I've heard came from a man who had attempted suicide. In his near-death experience, he encountered this overwhelming peace and love. He said it wasn't judgmental or disappointed in him. Instead, It seemed to understand completely why he had felt such despair, while simultaneously showing him that his true nature was indestructible joy. He returned to life not out of obligation, but out of a desire to share this discovery with others who were suffering. This is perhaps why so many people who return from near-death experiences become more compassionate, more service-oriented. They've touched something universal, something that connects all beings. They've discovered that the peace they experienced isn't personal, it's the ground of all existence. And once you know that, how can you not want to help others find it too? The peace in death might be the universe's way of saying, welcome home. You were never really separate. You were never really alone. You were never really in danger. It's the cosmic exhale after a lifetime of holding our breath. It's the moment when all our questions dissolve, not because they're answered, but because we realize we are the answer. But here's the beautiful paradox. Understanding this doesn't make life less important. It makes it infinitely more precious. If we're eternal beings having temporary human experiences, then every moment of this life is a unique gift. Every relationship is a sacred encounter. Every challenge is an opportunity to remember who we really are. The fear of death that haunts so many of us might actually be a fear of life, a fear of fully embracing this temporary, precious experience because we're afraid of losing it. But what if we knew, really knew, that we can't lose what we truly are? What if we understood that the peace waiting for us in death is the same peace available to us right now? How differently might we live? I think about the countless individuals who've shared their experiences with me, and there's a pattern that emerges time and time again. Before their near-death experience, many lived with a constant low-level anxiety, a sense that something could go wrong at any moment, that they needed to control everything to stay safe. After touching that infinite peace, they describe a fundamental shift. Not that problems disappeared, but that their relationship to problems transformed. One woman put it beautifully. Before, I was like a swimmer fighting against the current, exhausting myself trying to get somewhere. After my experience, I realized I am the water. The current is me. The destination is me. Everything is me. How can I fight against myself? This isn't just poetic language. It's a direct description of a shift in consciousness that many people report after encountering the peace that comes with death. This peace isn't passive or disconnected from life. In fact, many describe it as intensely alive, vibrant with a kind of intelligence that surpasses our normal understanding. It's not the absence of experience, but the presence of all experience without the filter of fear. Imagine seeing the world without the lens of what can hurt me or what can I lose. This is how many people describe life after touching that eternal peace. A cardiac surgeon once told me about his own near-death experience during a medical emergency. He said that, as a doctor, he'd always thought of death as the enemy, something to fight against at all costs. But in those moments when his own heart stopped, he encountered a peace so profound that it revolutionized his entire approach to medicine. I still fight to save lives, he said, but now I understand I'm not fighting against death. I'm fighting for more time to experience the love that underlies all existence. This brings us to a profound question. If this peace is our true nature, why do we create so much suffering for ourselves and others? Perhaps it's because we've forgotten who we are. We've identified so completely with our temporary fears, desires, and thoughts that we've lost touch with the eternal peace that is our birthright. Death, then, isn't a punishment or an ending. It's a reminder, a homecoming, a gentle awakening from the dream of separation. Many spiritual traditions teach that the fear of death is really the ego's fear of its own dissolution. The ego, that collection of thoughts, memories, and identifications we call me, knows it's temporary. It fights to survive, to maintain its boundaries, to stay in control. But our true self, our essential nature, has never been born and can never die. It's the awareness in which all experiences arise and dissolve. When people describe the peace in their near-death experiences, they often say things like, I was still me, but I was also everything. This points to a state of consciousness where individuality expands rather than disappears. You don't lose yourself. You discover that yourself is much vaster than you ever imagined. The boundaries that seem so solid in life become transparent. revealing that you were never really separate from the love that permeates all existence. This understanding has profound implications for how we live. If the peace we seek is already within us, then our spiritual journey isn't about acquiring something new. It's about removing the obstacles to what's already present. Every fear we face, every attachment we release, every moment of genuine surrender brings us closer to the peace that's been waiting patiently beneath our turbulent thoughts. A hospice nurse once shared with me her observations from decades of sitting with the dying. She said that regardless of how people lived their lives, in their final moments, almost everyone touches this peace. It's like watching someone remember something they'd forgotten, she said. Their faces soften, their breathing becomes easier, and even if they can't speak, you can see in their eyes that they're seeing something beautiful. This suggests that the peace isn't something we earn or deserve, it's something we are. Our life experiences, whether joyful or painful, are like waves on the ocean of this eternal peace. The waves can be turbulent or calm, but they don't affect the depth. Similarly, our thoughts and emotions, our successes and failures, don't touch the essential peace that is our true nature. Think about what this means for our fear of death. If death is really a return to our natural state of peace, then what exactly are we afraid of? Perhaps we're not afraid of death itself, but of letting go of our familiar identities, our cherished stories about who we are. Yet those who return from death consistently tell us that letting go doesn't diminish us. It expands us into something magnificent beyond our current imagination. One man who had a profound near-death experience during surgery told me, "I understood that I had been living in a small room, thinking it was the whole house. Death showed me that the walls I thought were protecting me were actually imprisoning me. The peace I encountered wasn't just absence of fear, it was the presence of a love so vast that fear simply couldn't exist in its presence." This love that people encounter in death isn't sentimental or conditional. It's described as a fundamental force like gravity or light that holds everything together. Many say it's not that this love judges us, but that in its presence we see ourselves clearly for the first time. All our pretenses fall away, and we're left with the simple truth of what we are, beings made of love, temporarily forgetting our true nature. The peace that comes with death might be the universe's way of welcoming us home, like a mother who never stops loving her child, no matter how far they wander or how much they forget. This peace waits patiently for our return. And remarkably, we don't have to die to begin this journey home. Every moment of presence, every act of love, every release of fear brings us closer to the peace that is our birthright. These insights from those who have glimpsed beyond death's door offer us a precious gift. The understanding that peace isn't something we need to achieve or earn. It's what remains when we stop struggling, stop pretending, stop running from our own true nature. The peace that awaits us in death is available to us now, in this very moment, if we simply have the courage to stop and listen to the silence between our thoughts, the space between our breaths, the love that underlies all existence. What would your life look like if you truly knew, not just believed, but knew with every cell in your body, that you are already home, that the peace you seek in achievements, relationships, or spiritual practices is already within you? This is the gift that near-death experiences offer us, not just hope for what comes after death, but a roadmap for how to live now. I remember a conversation with a woman who had a near-death experience during childbirth. She said something that has stayed with me ever since. In that moment of absolute peace, I understood that every single fear I'd ever had was based on a lie. The lie that I could somehow be separated from love. She went on to explain that this realization didn't make her fearless in the conventional sense, but it gave her fears proper context. Now when I feel afraid, she said, it's like watching clouds pass through the sky. The fear comes, I acknowledge it, but I don't identify with it. I remember the sky behind the clouds. This is perhaps the most practical gift from these experiences, the understanding that our thoughts and emotions, including our fears about death, are temporary weather patterns in the vast sky of consciousness. We can observe them, learn from them, even appreciate them, without being controlled by them. The peace that people encounter in death is like discovering that we are the sky itself, not the weather. A neuroscientist who had his own near-death experience during a week-long coma shared something fascinating with me. He said that from a scientific perspective, his brain shouldn't have been capable of any experience at all during that time. Yet he encountered a realm of indescribable peace and love that felt more real than anything he'd experienced in physical life. It challenged everything I thought I knew about consciousness, he admitted. But it also gave me the most profound gift, the experiential knowledge that consciousness isn't produced by the brain. It exists independently, and its natural state is peace. This perspective aligns remarkably with ancient wisdom traditions. The mystics have always taught that what we call normal consciousness, with all its fears, desires, and constant chatter, is actually a contracted state. Our true nature is vast, peaceful, and interconnected with all of existence. Death might simply be the moment when this contraction finally releases and we expand back into our natural state. One particularly moving account came from a veteran who had a near-death experience after being severely wounded in combat. He described how in life he had built walls around his heart to protect himself from pain. In death, those walls dissolved instantly. It wasn't that the walls were torn down, he explained. They simply didn't exist anymore. I realized they had never been real, just constructions of my own fear. The peace I encountered didn't judge me for having built those walls. It simply showed me I didn't need them anymore. This raises profound questions about the nature of healing. Perhaps true healing isn't about fixing what's broken, but remembering what's whole. The peace that people encounter in death seems to act like a mirror, reflecting back to us our own inherent completeness. Many describe feeling for the first time that they are enough, not because they've achieved something or become someone special, but simply because they exist. A hospice chaplain once shared with me her observations of working with people of all faiths and no faith at all. She said, "It doesn't matter what people believe intellectually. When death comes close, almost everyone touches the same peace. It's as if all our religious and philosophical differences are just different maps to the same territory. And when you finally arrive at that territory, you don't need the map anymore." This universality of the peace experience suggests something profound about human consciousness. Regardless of our beliefs, cultures, or life experiences, we all seem to share the same fundamental nature. The peace that comes with death isn't Christian or Buddhist or Muslim, it's human. Or perhaps more accurately, it's divine. And we're all expressions of that divinity temporarily forgetting our true nature. I think about the implications of this for how we treat each other. If we all share this essential nature of peace, then every act of violence or hatred is really an act against ourselves. Every judgment is a failure to recognize our own reflection. Every fear is a forgetting of who we truly are. The peace that people encounter in death often comes with this profound recognition of universal connection. One woman described returning from her near-death experience with an overwhelming compassion for everyone she met. "I could see the divine light in everyone," she said, "even in people who couldn't see it in themselves. I understood that all our conflicts and problems come from forgetting who we are. If we could all remember the peace that is our true nature, the world would transform overnight." This might sound idealistic, but I've witnessed the practical effects of this transformation in countless individuals. People who touch this peace often become powerful forces for healing in their communities, not because they're trying to fix or change others, but because they've remembered something essential about human nature, and that remembrance is contagious. A businessman who had a near-death experience during a heart attack told me how it completely changed his approach to leadership. "Before, I managed through fear, my own fear and the fear I instilled in others. After experiencing that infinite peace, I realized that fear is just a very convincing illusion. Now I lead by helping others remember their own strength, their own peace. The results have been remarkable, not just in productivity, but in the genuine joy people find in their work." This suggests that the peace we encounter in death isn't meant to be hoarded or kept secret. It's meant to be shared, lived, expressed in our daily action. Every person who returns from these experiences becomes a kind of ambassador, carrying a message from our true home back to those still lost in the illusion of separation. The peace is calling to us even now, in this moment. It's in the space between these words, in the silence between our thoughts, in the love that motivates us to seek understanding about life's deepest mystery. We don't have to wait for death to answer its call. We can begin the journey home right now, with our next breath, our next act of kindness, our next moment of genuine presence. As I reflect on the thousands of near-death experiences I've studied, one thing becomes crystal clear. The peace that comes with death is not an ending, but a revelation. It shows us what we've always been, beneath all our fears and struggles. And perhaps most beautifully, it shows us that we don't have to die to live in this peace. We just have to remember who we really are. So here we are, at the threshold of one of life's greatest mysteries. Why do we feel peace when we die? Perhaps because death isn't what we think it is. Perhaps it's not a departure but an arrival. Not a loss but a recognition. Not an ending but a remembering of what has no beginning and no end. The accounts from those who have glimpsed beyond death's door consistently point to the same truth. We are not these fragile bodies, these anxious minds, these temporary identities we've constructed. We are something far more vast, far more beautiful, far more eternal than we dare to imagine in our daily lives. The peace that comes with death is simply the moment when we finally remember this truth. But the real miracle is that we don't have to wait for death to access this peace. It's here now, in this very moment, waiting patiently beneath the surface of our thoughts. Every time we choose love over fear, every time we embrace rather than resist, every time we open rather than close, we're taking a step toward the peace. That is our true home. Think about it. If this peace is our natural state, then every moment of suffering is an opportunity to question what's keeping us from it. Every fear is an invitation to look deeper. Every loss is a chance to discover what can never be lost. The challenges of life aren't punishments or random cruelties. They're opportunities to remember who we really are. One of the most profound lessons from near-death experiences is that this peace isn't earned through good deeds or spiritual practices. It's not a reward for the worthy or a consolation prize for the suffering. It's the fundamental nature of existence itself, available to all, at all times. We don't create it or achieve it, we simply stop resisting it. A woman who had died for several minutes during surgery once told me, "The biggest surprise wasn't the peace itself, but the recognition that it had always been there. It was like I'd been searching everywhere for my glasses, only to realize they'd been on my head the whole time." This is perhaps the most important message from those who have returned. The peace we seek in life is the peace we find in death, and it's been within us all along. So as we navigate this temporary human experience, with all its joys and sorrows, triumphs and failures, perhaps we can remember this truth. Behind every fear lies peace. Beneath every question lies knowing. Within every ending lies a new beginning. And at the heart of every death lies the infinite life that we truly are. The peace that comes with dying isn't just waiting for us at the end of our journey. It's walking with us every step of the way. It's in every breath we take, every heart that beats, every act of love we share. We are never separate from it, even when we can't feel it. We are never alone, even when we think we are. We are never truly in danger, because what we essentially are cannot be harmed, cannot be lost, cannot die. This is the gift that understanding death offers to life, not fear, but freedom. Not endings, but eternal beginnings. Not separation, but the recognition of our unbreakable connection to all that is. The peace that comes with dying is really the peace of finally remembering who we've always been. And that remembering can begin right now, in this moment, with your very next breath. What will you do with this knowledge? How will you live, knowing that the peace you seek is already within you? How will you love, knowing that separation is an illusion? How will you face your fears, knowing that your true nature is indestructible? These aren't just philosophical questions, they're invitations to a different way of being. Every person who has touched that infinite peace and returned to tell about it carries the same message. Wake up. Remember who you are. The peace is already here. You are already home. And maybe, just maybe, as more of us begin to remember this truth, we can create a world that reflects the peace of our true nature. A world where fear no longer drives our decisions, where love is recognized as the fundamental force it truly is, where death is understood not as an enemy, but as a doorway, back to the infinite peace that we never really left. The journey continues, but now we know where it leads, not to some distant paradise, but to the recognition of what has always been here. Not to some future salvation, but to the present moment awareness of our own eternal nature. The peace that comes with dying is simply the peace of being what we truly are, and that perhaps is the greatest gift death can offer to life.